Good evening and welcome back to Byline. This is a public affairs show here at Amherst Media, and it's co-sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters. And this is our attempt right here at Amherst Media to help our community keep up with the changes in our new form of government and see how they're all playing out. And you get to hear from our town councilors and from members of various committees that have been established, some of which are required by the charter and others are things that the council has decided to put together to help address issues and concerns here in town. And today we have the chair and the vice chair, Meg Gage and John Page. Oh,
we rhyme.
The Gage and Page show.
Yes.
And they are the chair and the vice chair of the Participatory Budgeting Commission. And so first, let's just familiarize people with who you are. Meg, everybody knows you. You were in town meeting. You were on the Charter Commission. Tell us more about your history here in town.
Well, I actually don't like to talk about how long I've lived here because there's a sort of annoying tradition of people in Amherst doing that if you haven't lived here for 50 years, you're a newbie. I did, however, grow up in Amherst, in the downtown actually, where you wouldn't imagine how people would live, and graduated from Amherst High School and was away for several years and came back. I've been more of an organizer than an elected official. I was elected to town meeting and the Charter Commission, but my style is more organizing people behind the scenes.
Or not so behind the scenes,
Well.
but organizing people, but also always to engage with the community and
Right.
with our government, et cetera. So, I
Right.
mean, that's an important part of our participatory system,
Right.
speaking of participation. And so, John, you are a former candidate. You are a UMass grad. What else do we need to know about you?
Originally from Pelham, I graduated from Amherst High as well, and then attended UMass where I studied business and political science, and I've chosen to stick around. So I'm
Great.
really happy to be here.
That's great.
you have
And
a-
we reminisced yesterday as we were preparing for the show, and I did a word association, and I said, Norm Page, and he said, grandfather. And Norm was on the select board in Pelham when I was running for state representative. And,
So you have a couple of townies on your hands.
we definitely
Yes,
do.
absolutely.
A couple of townies separated by a few years, but not
Yep.
that many, but both
Quite a
with
few.
a deep interest in the community. So let's talk about the Participatory Budgeting Commission. Where does it come from?
The Participatory Budgeting Commission is mandated by the Charter. I'll speak first since I was...
Absolutely.
It's in the Charter. It is required. And we have to produce a report of proposal by December 1st, 2020, so just a little more than a year. And the idea came from the Charter Commission's sincere unanimous belief, and I can say that as we didn't agree on a lot of things, but I do feel that everyone on the Charter Commission sincerely sought robust participation in the new government, particularly because that was the best way, most of us felt, to get past the tensions and divisions that while we were losing town meeting, we would create new, robust, meaningful mechanisms for participation.
Yeah, because there's a long history in this community of participation, and even though we were changing forms of government, it was still a bedrock value and a part of the foundation. And hardly a show goes by, if any does, that I don't say the Charter says we should be transparent and civically engaged, and this is a part of civic engagement.
And I'm interested in what you think, John. Participation doesn't happen just because you say to people, we want you to participate. Please do. There's a forum for you to come and talk.
And this is why this will be an interesting mechanism, because there's actually dollars on the line if we were to implement this here in Amherst. So it really motivates people to get involved in the budgeting process, which sometimes for most residents can be kind of an opaque process that they don't really engage with. So participatory budgeting in other communities is a way for people, even of all ages, sometimes high school, middle school, elementary school students, citizens, non-citizens, to engage with the budgeting process. And what's also interesting about the Participatory Budgeting Commission is it's a commission. So when people ask us, maybe after the show, well, how would that work here in Amherst? The question is, that's what our job is to figure out in this next year.
So we don't know yet how to do it. And the commission is very new. You've had how many meetings?
We've had 2 meetings. We were mandated to be established within 6 months of the election, which we were established, but a meeting wasn't convened until October. So we've had 2 meetings. We have one in December, and then another year of deliberation.
So it's pretty obvious why you would be on this commission and even be chair of it, because you brought this idea to the Charter Commission process and helped build a coalition of people engaged in the process around the idea. But John, how did you end up on this commission?
Sure. So as a student at the university, and also when I chose to run, I'd always talked about engaging all sorts of people in the political process. And something that I knew about my generation was people are paying attention to the national politics. They're engaged at that level. But I tried to argue that all politics are local, and the decisions are made at the local and state level that you need to be in tune to and participating in. So I was excited about this mechanism, and the town did a really good job outreaching to people, looking for people of different backgrounds to be involved in this committee. And so one of the town hall staff asked me if I wanted to be involved in this, and I looked more into it and said, absolutely, this could be a way to get more people involved in the budgeting process.
That's great. So let's drill down a little bit more on that. So you said a few minutes ago, which I really liked, was, people of all ages and backgrounds can engage in this process if the town council approves it and we move forward with it. There is a guarantee that we move forward based on the charter, or is it a proposal?
It's a proposal. This came up late in the charter process, and there frankly wasn't time to fine-tune exactly what the plan would be. And there was also, we just ran out of time. So unlike the Ranked Choice Voting Commission, our commission is mandated to make a proposal that the council will approve or disapprove.
Ultimately decide upon.
Right.
Okay.
The Ranked Choice Voting Commission was mandated to make a proposal that will be implemented.
Got it. Although the town council can amend their proposal, but the point is, the intention is, at the end of that process, there will be ranked choice voting. In this case, these are recommendations and a vision for how we could do this, but it's not a guaranteed approval. So the public will have to engage in understanding the proposal and deciding if they want to weigh in on it or not. And so let's drill down a little bit more on this idea that people can engage in the participatory budgeting process once it gets set up, assuming that it's approved. The process of making proposals, do you have any idea how a typical citizen, because this isn't the first community to do this, correct?
No. Well, there are 1,500, or there are over 1,500 participatory budgeting processes in the world, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. The first one was proposed and created by the Brazilian Workers' Party in Porto Alegre.
Interesting.
And it was a way for impoverished people to have a say. In some parts of the world, it's been the way that they've expanded access to clean water. But in the United States, first of all, there's no fixed way that it has to be.
There must be some generally common elements.
There's some, yes.
So could you tick off a few of them just so we get a shape of what this idea is really about?
So the common elements are that there's some restrictions or limitations. So for example, most communities, you can't propose something that would have an impact on the operating budget in an ongoing way. It has to be projects that are like a capital project that is like crosswalk or a bike rack. And then it has to be, anyone can propose these, including non-citizen residents, and most places have the participation down to the age of 16, 14, or even 12. In Cambridge, it's 12. In Park Slope.
Cambridge, Mass.
Cambridge, Mass.
Okay.
In Park Slope, it's 12. Some
Park
places.
Slope is where?
In New York City. It's
New
one
York
of the
City, okay.
parts of Brooklyn.
So those are two examples in the United States,
Right.
one even in Massachusetts.
Right, and
Okay.
they're all over the place. Minneapolis, it's very small cities like Kingston, New York.
Mm-hmm.
So people propose things that they want that are small, like a $5,000 project. Some larger cities like Cambridge can propose big things, like they got a public toilet in Central Square. But in Amherst, we would have a much more smaller budget, and that kind of project wouldn't be possible. But the projects then have to be vetted to make sure they make sense.
Who vets them?
Well, that's one of the things that we'll figure out is different cities have different ways of doing that. Some of them have a volunteer committee of people who do that. There has to be, some places have a staff person. So one of the things the Charter Commission envisioned was, if this goes forward, the community participation officer, who's now 3 people, would help manage that. But there has to be a vetting, because people may propose something that doesn't make sense. So, for example, one city, some students proposed an app that they could use to order their lunches ahead of time in the school cafeteria. Well, the school cafeteria didn't have
The capacity
the beginning
to do
of the
that.
capacity to do that, so
Okay.
that was thrown out. So the projects are vetted, and then there's a big election.
How does that election happen?
Well, it's different in different places. Because it's not an official election, you can create your own rules. Most places it's done with online. A lot of places have some kind of a fair or an event where you can go around, and the people who've made the proposals do little posters.
Demonstration of what they would like to see happen.
and
Okay.
lobby for it, and letters to
Okay.
the editor of why they really need.
Another form of engagement
Right.
and participation. Okay.
And then there's voting.
Okay.
And thanks to technology, there are ways of voting with computers where people are assigned a number and they can only vote once. And so
Including ranked choice voting. So could you conceive of using a ranked choice voting method
wow.
for doing this, which would then back up this idea of ranked choice voting in our elections for
That's
our municipal officials?
You could.
You could do that.
That's a possibility.
Okay. All right. So people come forward with their ideas. They get screened by a panel that's previously established and identified, probably appointed by some entity. It could be the town council. It could be town manager.
All to be determined.
All
yeah.
to be determined. And then there is some kind of a prioritization, meaning not a prioritization. There's a sorting out, practical and impractical at this time, which doesn't mean it might not be practical a few years later, but now it's not practical. And so therefore, from 300 ideas, we now have 50 ideas, and now we have to go from the 50 down to X, and we don't know what X will be.
Right.
Right.
So you talked about a set-aside. You didn't use those words, but I heard it as a set-aside. So who determines how much money will be available to be spent in the participatory budgeting process in a given fiscal year?
So that's one of the things we have to figure out.
Okay.
It's difficult right now to imagine things coming out of the capital budget.
Right.
So it could come out of the capital budget. It could be a line item in the operating budget every year, to be different every year. Some places fundraise.
To match the money, or to
match,
add to the
or to
money,
add to
or
the
to
money.
create all the money that's going to be available?
There's every range.
Okay.
Of,
So it doesn't have to come out of our taxes, but it could,
it could, or it could
in part or whole.
right, but it come
Okay.
out of different budgets that
Budgets,
the town
yeah.
has.
And since it's one-time spending, it makes sense it goes in the operating budget, because you're not going to borrow money for a
Right.
one-time,
Right.
one-year project. So makes sense it would be in the operating budget.
Right.
But the revenue source is not clear. You'll be exploring ranges
That's what we
of
have to
options.
figure out.
We're lucky that we have town staff on our committee, as
Right.
well as a town councilor.
So they can bring the reality of
Exactly.
the day-to-day
So-
work of government to make this.
Absolutely. So in
Reasonable and
our first
workable.
couple months, we've been learning more about the budgeting process and about our revenues and expenses as a town, so that we know what we're up against. And then we also have our counselor, Kathy Shane, who is there, so she's able to inform us the different things that they're working on and how that might interact with, for example, the capital projects. So they are experts on our committee that can help us actually figure out what that number might be and what the sources would be for that.
Got it. So, and you're back to participation again there, and you're back to learning about the budget. So, have you discussed, given that you're learning about the budget now as part of trying to understand what it will take to make this work, how about the typical resident of the community who wants to participate when this system is up and running? Is there going to be any kind of an attempt to get them to understand enough about the budgeting process to be able to understand what's a realistic proposal and a realistic way to think about their proposal? Because I think that's one of the most exciting things about this, is that if you do it right, even as an individual resident who wants to make a proposal, you should learn something about the budget before you do it.
Right. Well, it works both ways, learning something about the budget before you participate in participatory budgeting, but also participating will in itself help people to have a different perspective. I mean, this question that befuddles governments everywhere who want robust participation is, how do you get it if people don't understand yet, or they don't see the relevance, or you know, the common conundrum of the public forum that 3 people attended, or the same 3 people attend who always attend.
Right.
So it works both ways, that people need to be informed about the budget before they participate, but also through participation, some light bulbs go off.
So,
hopefully,
since you just raised the subject again of participation and forums and engagement, has the commission begun to think about mechanisms that they might use to help people understand? This show hopefully will do that to some extent.
Yay, thank you.
But to help people understand what this is all about, and then how they can participate in monitoring and engaging with the work of the commission so that their voices are part of the recommendations that are put forward. Have you started to think about how some of that might be done?
We have. We discussed it in our last meeting, and we're still have to finalize this process, but we have a draft timeline. We're spending November, December, and January gathering information, doing research as a commission. And then we'll move on to engaging different stakeholders, and those starting with the town. So the JCPC, Joint Committee on Capital Planning, the Finance Committee of the Town Council, town staff, which we are lucky to have one on our committee. And then from there, we will start creating a list. So that will be a couple months of that work. And then we'll create some options. As we said, participatory budgeting can be many things. So we want to create a scale of all the different options, all the different ways that participatory budgeting could happen in Amherst. And then we're going to turn to engaging the public. We've identified public forums as one avenue, also soliciting feedback, whether it be email, written, to our committee. We always welcome that. People can always contact us, which they can find information for on the town website. We have a website up under participatory budgeting.
Separate page.
Separate page.
So you go to the town website, you find the menu.
/PBC.
PBC, Participatory Budgeting Commission. PBC, okay. And so you've now navigated your way to the page, and on that page you find?
Well, right at the moment you find our meeting materials.
Okay.
We've only had 2 meetings, and the first one was just gathering. So we have yet to fully use that.
But there is our contact, our staff liaison is, their contact information is there. So you're able to get in contact with the committee.
Is one of the community participation officers a prime contact as a staff person, or is it being shared among the 3?
That's a good point. At the moment, the community participation officers are not part of this process.
Okay. So the staff person
is Holly Bowser in the accounting office.
Okay. Holly Bowser.
Bowser.
Bowser. Very good. Okay, and your next meeting is?
Mid-December.
Mid-December.
We would love to have, it's I believe the 14th. It's on a Thursday at 4 o'clock in the meeting. I believe it's in the town hall
But they'll
Amherst.
find that on the website by navigating
Yes.
to your page. Good. And what's the agenda for that meeting?
We're going to begin the process of looking at what the range of what other communities are doing, what some of the debates have been about, and we're going to confirm, I hope, our timeline. We brought that up, exactly when are we hoping to do what.
And are you expecting that you're going to go all the way to December 2020
It's hard to,
before producing your product?
well, we have to produce it before that. It has to be produced by December 1st, so
December 1st.
it doesn't really
Thank
count.
you.
And
Okay.
the timeline that we've proposed is we would start drafting in September. So we
Okay.
have time to get feedback.
Okay.
Ideally, we would have 3 points of getting feedback at the beginning, just to tell people about it and get ideas. For example, a lot of communities have proposals made in categories. So there might be an environmental category, there might be a youth category, or schools. So getting feedback about that kind of general structure, and then one in the middle, and then when we've written or we have a draft. But that's just the ideal.
So it sounds to me like we're likely, if the town council approves your recommendations with or without amendment, we're looking at 2 budgets from now before it probably could be implemented.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so we're not rushing into this. We want to get it right, because once we get it set up, it's going to sort of roll from there. And so, okay, so that's good to hear and good to know that we're going to have some time to prepare and learn how to use
Right.
the system before we actually start making our proposals. Because I'm sure everybody's got at least one idea.
Right.
And
But the nifty thing about this is not just hearing everybody's ideas, but they have to persuade others
Other people, yeah.
to vote for it and not to
Right.
vote for something else.
Right.
The idea of using ranked choice voting is a very interesting idea,
Yeah.
but it's not just coming up with what I want, but convincing other people that what I want is what you want.
Yeah. How long has this been in place in, let's say, Cambridge, which is
7 years.
7 years in Cambridge, and they've been implementing it for 7 years?
Yes.
Or okay, and on average, do you remember how much they're?
It's I don't even want to say, because it's so much money that it freaks
because
people
it's
out.
the size of the
The
community.
size of Cambridge is
Cambridge is over
Their budget.
100,000 people. so-
118,000.
Yes. Okay.
I actually have a chart with different populations.
So they're in
and
the millions or hundreds of thousands?
hundreds of thousands,
They're in the
not a
hundreds
million.
of thousands. Okay. Well, even that is just a good frame of reference for people to understand. We're not talking about millions and millions of dollars.
No, no, no. The good thing about Cambridge is not to see it as a model for exactly how we would do it,
Right.
but they've been doing it for 7 years, and they've been very successful at engaging people and at figuring out some of the mechanics of how to do the voting, for example, and how to vet the project. So they're nearby, and they've offered to
Exactly.
help us if we want their help for
You
free.
can see what's worked well there.
Right.
They can tell you, because once you set something up, it's very difficult to change a lot of it, and so there will
Right.
be incremental changes. But they can say to you, when we set this up at first, we wish we had,
Right.
and that list will be
Right.
so valuable to you, because those
Right.
will be mistakes that you won't make,
Right.
Absolutely.
because you can learn by their example. Well, any other parting comments about the process, the product, the hopes that you have for this? Because it's new, it's different, it's exciting. It will be the first in this whole region to do it if our town council adopts it. Fears,
Well, the one thing I would
optimism.
just reiterate is that we're a commission, we're exploring this, we're investigating this, so we welcome input from everyone. We want to hear from people about it as we continue this year-long journey, and then beyond that if it's implemented. So we want to hear from people. We want participation in our participatory budgeting commission.
And then in the work if it's carried out.
Absolutely.
That's
Right.
great.
And-
Well, you heard it here, folks. This is our Participatory Budgeting Commission process, and this is an opportunity which, if you engage with this commission, we'll get a better product, and if the town council approves it, we'll be the first in our region and maybe the second in Massachusetts at this point. Do we know if there are any others?
I actually need to find that out if there are other
Okay.
places in Massachusetts. I'm not sure.
So we might be the second in Massachusetts and probably the first in central or western Massachusetts to
sure.
engage in this process that helps you understand how our budgets come together and how you can participate in in setting some of the priorities and spending some of the money. And as a former Ways and Means chair, I can tell you it was the best job in government I ever had, participating in thinking through the priorities, because basically budgets are all numbers, but behind the numbers are values. And it's what the people need and want. So thank you, too, for being willing to lead this commission. And thank you to the other members of the commission. And thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you again soon.